Thank you so much. I will be brief. Physical risks of the climate change are huge. We are talking about extreme weather events, flooding, droughts, heat waves, sea level rising. The main objective of the Paris Agreement is to strengthen the global response to the threat of climate change. We have three crucial challenges to address. Support projects with a positive impact on climate, refrain from financing highly emissive projects, and contribute proactively to a resilient, low-carbon transition in country and sector. Impact investors and banks have a key role to play in raising funding for climate action. The Group AFD and Proparco are strongly committed to climate finance, climate strategy, implementation, and climate imperatives, and our approach is really additional and complementary. Working with the government is very much active on advocacy by working with regulators to develop and implement regulation and incentives for climate finance. 1 year ago, AFD created a dedicated platform within the Indian banking system with one conviction, that greener system was a prior and initial step to catalyze more climate finance. In the other side, Proparco works exclusively with the private sector, supports voluntary initiatives which have traditionally been largely centered on ENS issues, on energy efficiency or RE financing. These two approaches are relevant and we really need to discuss together to come up with innovative solutions. I'm really happy today to monitor this session. And my first question will be to Sanchayan. A large focus on climate finance will need to be on capital intensive sectors such as power, industry, or automobiles. What role do you see of impact investors such Aavishkaar play in this agenda?
Thanks, Jan. You're right. Yeah, a lot of the climate investment, I mean, there are trillions of dollars that need to go anywhere. You know, the estimates go from $10 trillion for India to $100 trillion for the world. A bulk of that obviously has to go into, building up large infrastructure, changing industrial processes, and so on. A lot of that debate, though, in our opinion, is very carbon-centric only. I think we should not forget that a bulk of the impact that happens of climate change is on the low-income population, right? 80%, there's a World Bank report which says about 100 million people will go back into extreme poverty due to climate change by 2030. 80% of that is going to happen in Asia and Africa. And that's not just a carbon mitigation challenge. That's a carbon adaptation to climate change and a resilience challenge, right? That's at the core of, that constituency is at the core of what the Aavishkaar group invests in. A lot of the impact investing community invests in. So I think there's a lot, that needs to be done, by the impact investing community. So that's a reason for why we need to get involved. What can we do realistically? There's obviously a whole venture capital, early stage tech investment opportunity in climate, which is to do with both mitigation and adaptation. I think as impact investors, we have a specific role to play in resilience building and adaptation technologies. Whether it's water, and not just technologies, also service providers. So whether it's, shared mobility, right? Whether it's water, raising water levels, investing in, ecosystems, investing in coastal regions with mangroves so that, the coastal communities are protected. So there's a whole host of investments that need to get done where we think the impact investing community needs to invest. And that's at the core of why, as the Aavishkaar group, we think climate change is the huge agenda item for the group.
Thank you so much, Sanchayan. IntelliCap has been working across the spectrum of climate solution with a diverse range of stakeholders. What do you see are the key challenges in meeting these climate commitments? And how do you see the mitigation and the adaptation solution emerging into this landscape?
Thanks, Dian. I think if I have to just put a precursor to the answer I'm giving, first, the boundaries between the development finance and the climate finance are completely blurred. And if I talk about the challenges, if you look at the ticket size that the financial institutions are very comfortable with, the existing financial institutions are very comfortable with the ticket size, anything of $50 million and above. And that was exactly the size the climate finance was being delivered. Now, despite all the comfort of the financial institutions and all the expertise they did a not so great job. So the climate finance ecosystem is looking for scale and speed, which is not coming. So challenge-wise, we are talking about a proven financial system still struggling to deliver what they were comfortable with. Now, with the discussions around loss and damage, adaptation, resilience, and metrics which are going beyond the carbon, as Sanchan is talking about, like how you improve the resilience of a small farmer, how you do the resilience building for a community. There are no metrics to talk about because they're very different. So the first thing that we are seeing in this space is that the financial institutions have to revamp themselves or use the kind of channels that have been catering to this segment and leverage for climate finance. So the likes of Asto Finance and the Arohan would be critical to deliver the kind of product we are talking about. If I talk about the opportunities emerging, you know, mitigation has been a global problem. Adaptation is a more of a local challenge. Globally, climate finance has been primarily, north-driven. Adaptation need are south-driven. So what we see, and as Intellicap, we are working towards building that ecosystem for providing that, adaptation financing, resilience financing to the community that we stand for, MSME, farmers, etc. We see the need for the global south to start having these kind of mechanisms to come up. Because if the mechanisms are not there, the climate finance will never reach to the right constituency.
Thank you so much. Finally, climate change without involving entrepreneurs is nothing. So, as an entrepreneur, can you give us your perspective on what you would like to be delivered by the global leaders and the financing community?
Thank you. I think what's important to understand is when you talk about climate, there is significant amount of risk involved as well. And the appetite for risk in climate finance is still not there. And that's the challenge which I think in all the sectors, not only in waste or anything related to environment, but anything related to even EV mobilities and automation and all that stuff, there is still an absence of that ability to take risk from the financial institution. They would want a lot of comfort in a lot of things where innovation is still happening. Climate finance needs that ability of taking risk for that scale and the speed at which it really has to deliver. And I think that is something which really needs to move very fast compared to what's happening today. And I think the amount of money allocated to is there, but the appetite to take that risk to move that very fast needs to evolve very quickly.
Totally agree with you. They asked me to really wrap up very quickly, but I have still one last question which we need to talk about. Is the new topic that Aavishkaar is taking into account, the natural capital focused investment strategy. Can you please tell us a few words on that?
Thanks, Jan. I'm going to be quick. I talked about the adaptation and resilience needs. There is a desperate need to invest in the natural capital. A lot of the financial sector doesn't sort of invest enough. We heard the risks that the entrepreneurs are talking about in that. So what we're looking to do is to actually provide capital in a form of payment for ecosystem services. So it is actually providing capital for restoring natural forests, degraded natural forest, for mangroves, for regenerative agriculture, which can sequester carbon. And that can lead to carbon credits, which can then be monetized. So the monetization mechanism for a fund like that is through the carbon markets, which are growing very significantly right now. But it leads to a lot of impact, direct impact on the communities, besides the impact on carbon mitigation overall.
Thank you so much. One last question on the circular economy. Sorry, I have to ask it because it's one of the major topic today in India. A lot of innovation are coming up. How do you see the impact investor on this sector?
I think the connect between the innovation on various fronts on circularity requires a lot of understanding on the value chain, right? And when this subject is being discussed, the biggest challenge is the appetite to understand that subject and try to take the risk around that, because innovation in circularity carries a perceived risk, not necessarily there's being a risk, but it's a perceived risk, and fear of unknown in that value chain is what requires significant effort. And I think there is significant amount of movement happening in circular economy. Scale is also going to come in because the innovations are coming very interesting ones. But again, as I said, everything boils down to bringing that scale with capital, which is aligned to focus on the risk, at the same time expect significant benefits out of those innovations as well. And I think climate change can only be solved by those innovations, and capital needs to be put behind them.
Agree. Maybe a last word. I think climate change and all this complicated challenge can be solved only to be together. And I think Vikas told us also in the last panel. Together, I think we have to push for more concrete transformation. Thank you so much.